Well, I didn't until just a few minutes ago. Please, thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. We got another pretty good crowd for this evening. We appreciate you being here, and anybody that's watching on the internet, we appreciate you being with us as well. We're on lesson 3. We're studying the Old Testament book by book. Thank you. You're welcome. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about Joshua, Judges, and Ruth. Oh man, something went down the wrong way. Of course, we want to keep Kimberly and her family in our thoughts and prayers with the passing of her grandmother. They're going to leave out early in the morning and head down to the funeral tomorrow. And then I'd ask that you remember our neighbor, next door neighbor, Linda Brown. A lot of you know who that is. If you've come to the pumpkin carving party, they come over sometimes for that. And some of you went to school with her husband, BB. But anyway, she is going to have a pretty good section of her colon taken out tomorrow. So I don't know how much. She had a colonoscopy today, and I guess that was maybe determine how much was going to come out. So I didn't talk to them today. But anyway, keep her in your prayers tomorrow as well. Pardon me? Bernard Marshall. Okay. Okay. They're related who? Okay. I'm not familiar with that name for some reason. Okay. The Bernard Marshall family. Okay. Brother Jeff, would you say a prayer for us before we get started? Amen. Well, I apologize. Something is not working right now. Number 1, it talks about name the 12 books of history. And of course, we know that's Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther. These 12 books cover a period of time of about 1,050 years, somewhere from about 1450 BC to about 400 BC. Give or take a year or two, depending on who you talk to. But that's generally the consensus about a period of time of about 1,050 years. There's Miss Diane, and I wanted to talk to her before class, and I hope you brought your teacher's manual. Do you have the good, because I need to see what this next question, what the book says about this next one, because I couldn't come up with a good one. But yeah, well, I came up with one. I don't know if it's the right one. But anyway, number 2. These books record what history? Israel's history, Israelites' history from the taking of Canaan. That part was easy, but to when? Restoration, okay. Return of captivity. Babylon, is that what the book said? Babylonian captivity, okay. I wasn't really Okay. Okay, well, I should have looked over there. I didn't look over there. Yeah. What I wrote down after I started looking through it and trying to figure it out, because when you look at the 12 books of history, the last book is Esther. So I thought, well, maybe it's talking about that a little bit, which would be the saving of the Jewish people by Esther, but anyway, so put down what you think was right. I don't know if there was necessarily a right or wrong answer on that. But I do know it was Israelites' history from the taking of Canaan until, what did the book say? The end of Babylon? End of captivity? End of the captivity. Okay. All right. So we'll go with that. Joshua, of course, we've been talking about that Sunday morning. Brother David Cottle has started that topic or that study. We'll talk a few things about that a little bit. So what did Joshua, number 3, what does the book of Joshua tell about? Taking of the promised land. Yeah. Okay. Moses has died. Joshua is now in charge, and now they're actually going in to Canaan to take over that land. So number 4, I just answered that question. Who took Moses' place? Well, it was Joshua. The thing to note about that is, again, God chose Joshua. God picked him. It wasn't, the Israelites didn't do it. He wasn't chosen by man, but God took him out. And when you read through the verses, God instructs Moses, because Moses is still alive when Joshua was selected, and Moses takes him before the high priest, Eleazar, I believe is the name, one that he takes him for. And they go through, pretty much kind of whatever ritual that they did at that point in time. But Joshua is appointed next in line, and that makes it official when they go to the high priest, and the people recognize it and all that. So number 5, what was Joshua's involvement in the spying of Canaan at Kadesh Barnea? Yeah, he was one of the 12 spies. One of 2. Who was the other one? Caleb. Joshua and Caleb give a positive report. And I think we talked about this a little bit last week, or maybe David did, but God was extremely angry at that report when it came back and the 10 said, it's a good land and everything, but, the people are giants and the people are this and that. We can't do this and we can't do that. God wanted to destroy these people. And Moses, basically goes for the intercession on their behalf, says, no, let's, don't destroy them. He says, well, okay, but you're going to wander for 40 years until this generation passes away. They spied the land for 40 days. These 12 men are out in the Canaan, going through the land, and they're gone for a period of 40 days. Let's see if there's anything else I wanted to talk about. Okay. So what's the main events that take place in Joshua? What's the first one? Rahab and the spies. We'll come back and talk about some of these here once we name them all. Okay, Rahab and the spies. What's next? Crossing of the Jordan. Okay. Then fall of Jericho. Okay, the land is conquered and divided. And then what's the last? Death of Joshua. Okay. So David talked a little bit about Rahab and the spies. Of course, we know that the spy, Joshua and Caleb, right? Yeah, we're not told who talked to, are we? Okay, that's what I drew a blank there. Anyway, yeah. And one of the commentaries, I don't know if you guys looked at any of them, but one of the commentaries said that, I don't know how they arrived at this, they said probably that the spies met her prior to them going into the city. How else would they have known where to go? Well, God's providence, they might have known, but I don't know exactly how he arrived at that conclusion that they probably met her somewhere outside of the city. That was one of them that I read. I don't know if anybody else has seen that or read anything about that or not, but again, that's one man's opinion, and for what it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they would have been looking for a place to stay, and that would have been the logical place, as David said, and her being, a woman not so favorable. And a lot of the women, she was a Canaanite woman, most of them were looked on pretty lowly anyway. Women were not highly regarded to begin with. A lot of things just didn't work in her favor, being a Canaanite woman. Of course, we know that she lied. And we talked about this a little bit on Sunday about, a lot of people use that as justification for us being able to tell lies. Well, God allowed her, her to tell this lie or whatever. And, everything worked out okay for her. And look at, at the results of her life and everything. No, that's not the case. A lie is a lie. Now, and God didn't make her do it. You know, and she wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but other people that we read about in the Bible weren't perfect either. I mean, Peter was not perfect. Moses was not perfect. Abraham was not perfect. No one is perfect, obviously, other than Jesus. So, pardon me? Yeah, she turned it back to work in for her favor, obviously, yeah. But, you know, just because she sinned, and she, you know, she probably felt the pressure of the situation that she was in. I mean, she was confronted by the king's men. And just same way with Peter, you know, Peter stands over here and says, Jesus, I'll never deny you. But when he came to holding his feet to the fire, what did he do? He denied him 3 times. You know, we stand back here and say, oh, you know, if I was in this situation, I never would have done that. Or, you know, we've mentioned that a lot of times. You know, if I had lived back then when Jesus was alive, you know, I never would have rejected him. I would have accepted, you know, who he was and believed who he was and believed all the miracles that he did and all this and stuff. We can't. We don't know that. We don't know how we would have reacted at that point in time. So that's pure speculation on our part. The whole. Go ahead. No.
I was going to say Hebrews 11:31 says, by faith the heart of Rahab did not perish, but those who did not believe, when she had received the spies with peace. So God praised her for faith and for hiding the spies. It says nothing about the lie.
Exactly. God, a lie is a lie, no matter who tells it, and white, black, pink, whatever color you want to put on it. A lie is a lie, and it's wrong in God's eyes. But her faith obviously showed through. I mean, she believed in God. She knew that there was something else, you know, going on. You know, you just say a lot of things about her. And she did bargain and save her family. And then her lineage, she's listed in Christ's lineage and David's lineage on down through the Messiah. So, you know, say what you want to say. You know, she was a Canaanite. And one of the commentaries I read said, you know, she was a Canaanite woman, which kind of is a precursor to the Gentiles being brought into the family. You know, here's here you have a Gentile in the lineage of Jesus. So, you know, saying that, you know, he's here for everybody, not just the Jewish people. So, enough about that. Unless anybody has any questions, comments. Anyway. I've got a whole article. I didn't really read through it. You can go out on Apologetics Press. They've got a really good article about did God approve of Rahab's lie. I can either run you copies of this if you want to see it, or you can go out on Apologetics Press and do the search for it, and it'll pop up. And he's got a really good explanation of it. God did not approve of her lie, but he used her lie for the betterment of the Israelites and like I said, eventually down on through the lineage of Jesus. The crossing of Jordan. What is kind of amazing about that, when you read Joshua chapter 3 and you read verses 7 through 17, and you read about the account, if you look at verse 15, it talks about the river being at the brim. And this was probably somewhere in the spring, about this time of the year, in April. And that's when that Jordan River is known to flood, and to flood all those plains and stuff. And when it's talked about in verse 15 about being at the brim, means that it was flooded. It was as high as it could be. So these spies would have had to swam across this river. At some points in time, there are fords, and David talked about that. I think maybe you even brought that point up, Bill. There are points in time and places in that river when the water is down that you can actually walk across it. You can ford across it. This particular time it was not. It was high. Well, when did the waters part? What event had to take place? When the priests that were burying the tabernacle, when their feet touched the water, it's when it parted up, it walled up, dammed up, whatever the terminology would be, and they crossed on dry land. And it stayed that way until everybody got across and the priest stepped out of it. Once they stepped out of it, it came right back. Yeah, 12 stones out made a tabernacle, altar. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely. And when it fell into the wrong hands, things happened, didn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, when it was mishandled. Yeah, a lot of stories about the ark. Okay. The other event that took place in Jericho in Joshua is the fall of Jericho. Yeah, I gave that one away, which we already had it on there. And we can read about that in Joshua chapter 6. And that, you read the verses 22 and 25, and you see that the fulfillment of Rahab's promise and bargain with the spies is fulfilled there. We know that they marched around it 6 days, and then the seventh day they marched around it 7 times. The wall fell. Again, another commentary that I looked at, and I'm not sure, I couldn't verify. I don't know if you can or can't. They said that the 7th day that they marched around it probably was the Sabbath day. Don't know. Like I said, I had no way of verifying it. What's interesting about that is those walls were extremely thick. I mean, they were thick enough that there was walkways across the top of it, around the top of it. It was a gated city. It had iron gates, iron bars. It was, for the day in which it existed, it was a very, very fortified city, extremely fortified. Of course, skeptics wanted to say, well, it was just an earthquake happened. Just the right time, all of this events occurred in an earthquake. That's why it fell. No, it didn't fall. And you'll see a lot of other not off color, but another odd kind. They try to explain it away rather than God.
It's
Yes.
It's strange that this happened, but it's not strange that we hear
Yeah. Yeah. But the whole thing fell except for the portion of where Rahab was. That part still stayed intact, and they were able to get out of there.
One of the crucial things about Jericho's fall, it showed the Israelites kind of a pattern. Faithfulness leads to conquest. Faithfulness leads to success. And they would repeat that, except in a couple of cases, on and on in the conquest of Canaan.
Yeah, and Jericho is the first city that they're told to go take. When they go into the promised land, Jericho is the first place that they were told. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they didn't really have a choice other than to take it because, like I said, it was right there where they crossed. Okay. D talks about the land that was conquered and divided. You read about that in Joshua chapters 10 all the way through. I can't read my writings. Either chapter 10 and 11, or I think it went to 19. I think that's what that's supposed to be. A little bit of tidbit. What's a little bit interesting in that part is that, of course, the land is divided between all the tribes and everything, except for Levi's. The Levi's didn't get any portion of the land. However, there were 46 cities set up all throughout the place the Levi's occupied, and that pretty much was to give the children of Israel, a place to go for worship, for spiritual, not for worship, but for spiritual help, or for a place where they could find a Levite to teach them law or to offer an animal sacrifice. It was different places that they could go to and be in touch with the Levi priests, the priests for the Levi's, or the priests that were the Levi's that were priests, or whatever I'm trying to say. You know what I'm trying to say. Joseph's land was divided between his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. So those two tribes got Joseph's portion. And then the last one there is the death of Joshua. Not really a lot is said about his death. You read about that in Joshua 24, verses 29 and 31, other than he was 110 years old when he died. So not really a lot more than that talked about. with his death. Any comments about any of those sections? Anything out of Joshua? Okay. True or false? Number 7. Israel possessed all of the land that was promised to Abraham by God. Scripture says it's true. Joshua 21:43 says they possessed it all. Now, but what had happened? Or what did they not do? They hadn't driven all the people out of the land or killed them. That's what they were instructed to do. They were instructed to go in there and drive them out of the land. And if they will not leave the land, then you destroy them. Yeah, and don't marry their children. Don't fall down to the idols and a lot of other things. But those are the 2 main points. So yes, they did possess all of the land, but they were commingling with them in certain areas.
When you think about it, Israel back then was the government. Like God had them punish evildoers, and that's the purpose of it. They were awful people.
Yeah, the Canaanites were extremely wicked people. Yeah. Yeah, they were extremely wicked people. Yep. So yes, according to Joshua 21:43, they did possess all the land, but they didn't do what they were told to do as far as driving or destroying the people. Number 8, quote Joshua 24:15, and we all are very familiar with this. Choose you this day who you will serve. As for me and my family, we will serve the Lord. These words are still sound advice today to discuss some ways this challenge applies to Christians today. Okay, so what's challenging about that? A lot of challenges, aren't there? Just living in the world on a day-to-day basis is a challenge to serve God. And we still have a choice. Yes, we still have the choice to make. We can do it or not do it. Yep.
But we still have it easy compared to those people in the first century.
I agree. We have it a lot easier, I think, but it's still a challenge. And especially, and we talk about this all the time, especially our young people, our kids. The peer pressure that they deal with and the teachers that are trying to indoctrinate different things into them. The older you get, I think the easier it gets. The younger you are, I think it's still extremely hard to serve God. But as Jeff said, it's not as hard as they had it, I don't think, but it's still hard. We still have what? Yes, many people are to do what we are doing. They would be taken out and shot probably. They can't assemble as we do today. So just even the freedoms that we have in this country are a lot better than other parts of the world. So yes, we do have it. We do have it pretty good right now in this country. Not saying it can't change. And the way things are going, it's probably likely to at some point, but let's hope not.
I heard one story where there was a group of elders. They were worshiping in someone's house, trying to hide, trying to keep it as secret as possible. And the government would send in spies, fake as Christians, to see if they were worshiping. And they found that out, that there was a guy there. And what are we going to do? I was like, let's worship. Let's just, that's bravery.
Yeah, exactly. It sure is. Sure is. I got another piece of paper I want to find here. Okay, there it is. All right. Into the book of Judges. Number 10, the book of deliverance is the book of Judges. The book of Judges covers from the death of Joshua to the rise of Samuel. Covers this time frame. Number 11, what deliverance does this book record? Well,
they would sin, and their sin would lead to defeats. They lose land, then they would repent, they would turn,
yeah,
they would achieve some victory.
If you look at Judges chapter 2, verses 17 through 19, it talks about them being delivered from the Canaanites. So I think that's probably what the answer, what they were looking for. Eventually, it talks about them being delivered from the Canaanites. The next one is a little controversial. The book of Judges covers about how many years? Okay. If you read Acts chapter 13 and verse 20, Paul says it covers a period of about 450 years. But there seems to be a controversy there because in 1 Kings, and I didn't write that down. I meant to. I believe it was 1 Kings, and I'll have to find that and give it to you next week. Or no, maybe wait a second. Here it is. 1 Kings chapter 2 and verse 11. It talks about a period of less than that, of about 400 years. So, again, Apologetics Press has an article, did the period of Judges last 450 years? I won't read the whole article, but the gist of their, because, again, some people, skeptics, people are looking for something, way to discredit the Bible, say, okay, here you got another contradiction. You got this one says it's 450 years, and you got this one over here says it's only 400 years. The gist of their reasoning is that the King James and New King James are not a very good translation of this particular verse. That it should read that period of 450 years occurs before this time frame in Judges. So, again, I won't bore you with the whole thing. If you're interested in their thoughts on it, go out to Apologetics Press, or I can run you a copy of this as well, and you can look at that. 1 Kings 2, verse 11. Acts 13:21. And also he's got 1 Kings 6 and verse 1 as well. So anyway, there is some discrepancy on the exact number of years. According to Apologetics Press and their reasoning behind it, it looks like it's a period of 400 years, not the 450 that is recorded in Acts. How many judges were there in total? 15. Okay. These judges function primarily as what? I know everybody speak up at once. Do what? Yeah, kind of. It was actually, to me, it was kind of, their duties were kind of both. I mean, they were deliverers, but at the same point in time, they were called judges. So that kind of gives you, that they had some kind of a judicial position as well. So, yeah, they would.
I say deliverers because probably the ones we consider most prominent had military victories.
Yes. And the book, the Judges, the meaning of the book is deliverance, is being delivered. And we talked about the deliverance that's referenced mostly in the book is about being delivered from Canaanites. So it probably is, the correct answer probably is deliverers. And then the very next question talks about what's the cycle of their deliverance. What happens in that blank on the left-hand side? Sin. Yeah, they sin. Okay, and then the top, once they sin, what happens to them? They go into bondage. Then after they're in bondage for a while, what do? They repent. Okay, and then God does what? God delivers them. And then it just keeps repeating, doesn't it? It just goes in a cycle. It circles back around, doesn't it? Yeah, wash, rinse, repeat. Exactly. Yeah. They didn't heed the words of Joshua, did they? And the words that they agreed to. As for us, in this day we will serve the Lord. They just kept going around and around the circles. We talked about some of these judges when we went through the Old Testament at the very beginning of this particular course, but we'll talk about them just for a few minutes here again. Then we'll go down into Ruth. But who was the left-hand judge? Ehud. How do you say his name? Ehud. Okay. And of course, we know that he killed that wicked king, Eglon, something like that. Eglon. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. Egfu. Yeah. And the thing that was about that, he was left-handed, and so when he went into the king wouldn't have felt threatened by him because his right hand would have been exposed to him. His left hand was in his cloak or his coat, hiding the sword that he'd made. So most people being right-handed, the king wouldn't have been alarmed because he could see his right hand. Well, that was his downfall, wasn't it? And that king was extremely fat. Remember, we talked about that a little bit. So when he stabbed him, his fat, everything covered up the fact that he'd been murdered and had a sword sticking in him. So that gave Ehud a little bit of a chance to escape out of there. Go back and read some of those. I mean, it's kind of gory stories, but I mean, it's a neat read. It's interesting to read it. All of these actually that we talk about are interesting reads when you got a few minutes to do it. Who was the woman judge? Deborah. And Deborah and her commander Barak. They fought Jabin, the king of Canaan. They had 10,000 men that they went up against this king and basically wiped them out. After one thing I meant to mention, after Ehud killed the king, of course, here they go through this cycle again. So once he does that, they have a period of time that's peaceful, that they're obeying God of about 80 years. And then after Deborah and Barak battled the king and destroyed that king, they have peace again for about another 40 years. So you see this cycle again, that they just keep going around and around and around. Who was the judge with the army of 300? Gideon. And what's the story about Gideon? He started off with how many? Like 22,000 or something like that, I think what it was. And what's God telling? That's too many men. So he starts whittling them down, doesn't he? And finally, how does he arrive at these 300? What did they do? When they went to the creek, the brook, to get a drink, they drank with one hand and had their other hand on their weapon, didn't they? That was the 300 that he chose. Those 300 men went up against an army of 10,000 or more, a huge army. Just again to prove what? That God was with them. God was their deliverer. Okay. Again, another interesting story. Take time to go back through and read these things. We've all read them at some point in time of our lives, but we kind of forget about it. We talked about this one too when we did the study, the more brief than this study is, the brief study of the Old Testament. Who was the foolish judge? No, Jephthah. Okay. Why was he foolish? What promise did he make, or what oath did he make? Yeah, he was going to offer up his daughter, wasn't it? And I think Waldo made some points about that he didn't end up having to do that, but the oath was fulfilled. Again, an interesting read. He made it. Yes, we don't know what was provided, but evidently something was provided in that place because he still had to not obey the oath, but honor the oath, I guess would be a term. But yeah, anyway, we don't know exactly what took place, but there was evidently something that took place of his daughter.
I forget which commentary it was. My friend Drew pointed this out, that when he makes that vow, he says, "It will be that whatever comes out of the doors of my house will meet me. When I return to peace from the people of Amalek, shall surely be the Lord's." And he says, "And I will offer it up as a burnt offering." But he says that word Hebrew word "and" can either be "and" or "or." Now, if it was "or," that changes the entire thing, like his vow. But he says he can't prove that word is usually sometimes used as "or," so it's like.
Okay.
It bothers me now. You know what? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't make it dumb vow.
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole point. Don't make something that you can't do or back up or whatever. Yeah. All right, the last one, of course, we know who this is. Who's the strong judge? Samson. We all know that story. Yeah, exactly. One of the most famous stories in the whole Bible. Of course, it's a story about Samson and Delilah and all that. Most everybody knows that. So we've got about 5 minutes to get through Ruth, so we won't spend much time here with Samson. So anyway, Any comments about Judges? I know we go through it pretty quick, but that's just where we are with this. All right, so Ruth. The love story of the Old Testament is Ruth. Okay. Ruth was a descendant of Lot, a contemporary with the judge. I said the Moabites. She was a Moabite, so.
Well, her sister's child was the start of Ammon.
Okay. Yeah, I did read that. But Diane, what does the book say for that? Does it? Of the judges. Well, there you go. Extra points for Bill. Okay. Yeah, he gets a gold star. Gets that little thing put on his paper there. We'll give him a little star to put on his paper. Okay. Of course, we all know who this is. Who's Ruth's mother-in-law? Naomi. Then what's the major events in Ruth? Yeah, her husband dies. Yep. Then what? They return to Bethlehem, her and Naomi, okay? And then what happens? Her marriage to Boaz. Yeah. I mean, these two women had a lot of tragedy in their lives when you read through the story. I mean, their sons died, their husbands died. I mean, and of course we know back then that women weren't well provided for at all. So I mean they were up the creek without a paddle, so to speak.
Boaz sees her gleaning in the field.
Yeah.
Before she has to go out and get the scraps from the wheat field.
Exactly. I mean, that's how Boaz sees her is when she's in that field, basically scraping up whatever little bit of grain that they could get. I think so. Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
Nobody wanted to buy the land in the future. I guess an heir to it somewhere or another.
Yeah, I believe you're right. Somehow Naomi does get her land back. Yeah. So, okay, we got about 3 minutes, 2 minutes. So why is Ruth so important?
Jesus' genealogy.
It's the genealogy of Jesus again. Of course, she goes down through David and then all the way down through to Jesus, to the Messiah. Yeah. Yeah. Again, another Canaanite woman, another Gentile woman in Jesus' lineage. That makes two between Rahab and Ruth. Okay. All right. Let me see if there's anything under here that I had highlighted that we didn't really hit. Not really. Of course, we know that you can read about that Salmon, Salmon married Rahab, who then begat Boaz. Boaz married Ruth. And then you got Obed, Jesse, which, of course, then David comes through. So she is in the lineage of Jesus.
Roshal's great comment about whom you refer reminding me of the old Bob Dylan song. You might remember he said, you might serve the devil, you might serve the Lord, you got to serve somebody.
Well, that's true.
It's a song we did about 1979.
That's very true. We all do have to serve somebody. Either we're going to serve God or we're going to serve the devil. If we're not serving God, we're serving the devil. So that is a very true statement. So, anybody have any comments before we call it quits? Any questions? I know we go through it pretty quick. I apologize for that, but that's just kind of the way the lessons are set up. And
One cool fact about the Bible, Boaz, before he got married, was ruthless.
what was the one you told me about Joshua? And then,
Well, then he didn't have a mother and father because he was a son.
yeah, Joshua did not have a father or mother because he was a son of none. N-U-N. When you read through that. Yeah.
That's what I've been working on all week.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you for your help again. No, every now and then she writes it for you.